This week, one of my best friends has a birthday, and I've been super excited to make them a big, awesome poster of him as some kind of fantasy lumberjack character. And that'll make more sense when we get into character design, but I decided since I was doing this anyway, and this is going to be a more elaborate piece than I usually make on Popcross Studios, I might as well do a full breakdown of how I go about making a piece like this, from character design to planning the composition to the finished product. And hopefully there's some helpful tips in here, and I'm super excited to hopefully make an awesome piece of art for my friend's birthday. And for purposes of this video, I'll refer to him as Calvin. That's not his real name, but I don't know if he'd be cool with me using his real name. Anyway, let's get into the first stage, which is character design. So there's 3 things I like to do when I'm starting out with the character design stage. First of all, I like to make 3 or 4 or 5 silhouettes of the character with just nothing on, like just a blank body that I can start laying down some design elements onto. You want to make sure you go for a whole bunch of different design ideas. You rarely want to go with the first thing you design. It's often not your best idea. Then I like to jot down some lists of the character's traits, interests, and design elements. And I like putting that on the page that I'm doing the designs on, just so I can easily look over and reference them. And I'll go over the ones for this character when we're into the time lapse of coming up with our first ideas. And then finally, the other thing I like to do is have a whole bunch of tabs open with different reference images and ideas. I've got some pages open of Snow White and the Huntsman, because I know I like the Huntsman's design from that. I've got a page open on Dwarven Warrior ideas, and then some images of bears, because I know I want there to be an animal in this image, and just a whole bunch of tabs of different images that could give me some kind of inspiration. So with all that laid out before me, I'll get into some initial designs and go over what I want to do with this character for my friend Calvin. Alright, now designing this character is, I guess, a bit different than designing a character from scratch because I'm basing it off of someone I know and just kind of changing around a person I know and putting them in a different element. I'm putting this character in a fantasy sort of setting because my friend Calvin is a huge fan of fantasy in books and movies and TV shows, so I really wanted to do that. And then you can see under traits, I also had down lumberjack, which isn't exactly a character trait, but when you look at my friend Calvin, you kind of just think lumberjack, like he's got the beard, he's often wearing plaid or some kind of lumberjack-ish clothing, but the more actual character traits that I have down are hilarious and chill. And I can't really see hilarious being worked into the design because I don't want this character to be goofy looking. I mean, my friend Cal isn't a funny looking guy, he just is a really funny person. But I recommend jotting down those kinds of traits anyway, just so you keep them in mind while you're working on the character. For the visuals, the stuff I'm taking most inspiration from is the fact that this is a fantasy character, and my friend Calvin's interests more so. So I have written down under interests that he likes woodworking and hiking and dogs. And I wrote specifically dogs with those weirdly long noses. I'm not a huge fan of those dogs, but Calvin loves them, so I'm thinking of adding like a bear with a really long nose, some kind of, or dog bear hybrid kind of thing, something like that. But the way I want to work in the woodworking is I want to have this character have a big axe that they've carved themselves that's a bit intricate, has some kind of design on it. And then for hiking, that's just another thing to kind of remind me of like the lumberjack trait that I wrote down. This character is a woodsman kind of character. Even though they're in a fantasy setting, they're not like a knight or something like that. They're really a woodsman out in the woods in nature, chopping down trees and that kind of stuff. And then under design essentials, this is something that is more so because I'm basing this off of a friend of mine and I want to work in some references. I wrote down horse shirt. My friend Calvin used to always wear this horse shirt. Like, you know how in a lot of animated shows, a lot of characters will wear the exact same thing in every episode to make them easier to animate? Well, if Calvin was an animated character, that horse shirt would probably be the thing he wore in every episode. I don't even know if he has it anymore, but anyway, I know I want to work some kind of horse design into the character. I don't know if I want to give him an actual horse shirt, but I want to do something with horses, like maybe a horse emblem, like it's a clan tag or something like that. And then of course I gotta give the character a beard because my friend Calvin has a beard, and I gotta give the character an axe, as I said. So here are the first designs that I worked out. Alright, I really like some of the stuff that I've got down here, mostly from the second and third options. If I was designing this character for a recurring role in a comic or something, I'd do a whole bunch more designs to make sure I find something that I really, really love, but because this is for a one-time thing, I don't want to spend hours and hours and hours designing, so I'm gonna go with some of the stuff that I've got here. I'm gonna do one more round of rough designs using my favorite elements of the second and third characters here. I'm gonna add some color to it so I know what color I want the character to be, and then we can get into designing the poster. Alright, now you can see I'm putting the character in a slightly different pose for this round because I wanted to work the axe into this sketch. You'll notice I wasn't designing the axe in the last stage just because there wasn't really room for it on the page. And I had a basic idea of what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted a really big axe, but my favorite part of this was right as I was drawing it, I came up with the idea to put a horse head kind of carved into the head of the axe. And I thought that was a fun way to work in more of the horse shirt idea designs. You'll notice I also put them on the emblems that are holding up the character's cape. And then besides that, I mostly take elements from the second design I'd done in the last round. I add the plaid shirt onto this character that the third design had, but as sort of the undershirt that the second character had been wearing. I wanted to have the plaid in there because it feels like a pretty Calvin thing to wear, but I just didn't want it to be as overwhelming on the design, and I liked having that sort of leathery jacket vest kind of thing on the character as well. Now this ends up looking a little bit more modern than I'd wanted it to, but I still am pretty happy with how this is going, and I'm excited to get on to the next step. Alright, I'm liking what we got here. I want to add some details and stuff, but there's nothing that I really need to work out in here. I know the little things that I want to add, and we can do that when we're into doing the poster, which is what we're gonna do now. We can finally start getting into the actual design and layout of the poster. Let's do some thumbnail sketches. Alright, now getting into the composition stage, I didn't do as many thumbnail sketches as I normally would, but that's because I actually really liked my first idea that I jotted down. I'd come up with some ideas outside of this video, like when I'd been planning it in my head, I'd originally been thinking of it as some kind of crazy dynamic. The character was swinging an axe at a bear or something with a big, like, epic grin kind of thing, like a God of War style image. But then, as I was doing the character design stage for this, I realized that wouldn't actually be a great representation of my friend Calvin, which is what this character is supposed to be. Which is why the character design stage was so helpful, because you have to also represent the character in the composition of the image. If I was doing some super dynamic, epic pose, it would give a different idea of what this character is, and this character is pretty chill and relaxed, as we've said, and the idea of them fighting a bear didn't make as much sense because my friend Cal is an animal lover, as I jotted down in the earlier stage that he's a dog lover, but in general, he just loves animals. So I figured having him alongside this animal was a better idea. And I actually did something kind of funny. While I was drawing the big snout on this bear, it was really kind of weird looking, and I didn't think it was going to work so well, so I shortened it out, and then remembered my friend Calvin is a huge fan of Paddington. So I decided instead of making this a bear-dog hybrid kind of thing, I just made it an actual bear, but in Paddington's clothing. Anyway, here's what our rough drawing looks like. Alright, now, I really like how this is going so far, but I think I want there to be a little bit more focus on the character itself. I want the character to be a bit bigger, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip this thing a little bit. I'm gonna crop it in so that we're just looking at Calvin and the bear. I think that's gonna be a bit better for the purposes of this gift. So we'll make that quick tweak, and then we can get into the inking. Alright, now we're into the final stages of rendering, or you know, I guess inking is kind of second from the final stage, but you know what I mean. And it can be kind of intimidating when you get into some of the finalizing bits of the piece, because if you're spending a long time on something like this, you really don't want to mess it up, and it can be a bit nerve-wracking. Admittedly, most of my advice for the final rendering comes in when we get to coloring. For inking, I'd just say, you know, don't be too picky about all of your lines being perfect. When people look at the piece, they're not going to be looking straight at the one thing you messed up, or the thing that you perceive yourself as having messed up. So you can be a little bit more loose, and especially if you're coloring something, know that a lot of the inking stuff will get lost in the color anyway. Alright, now that we're into the coloring stage, I'll point out that you'll notice quickly that the only two colors that I use for this piece are blue and orange, and different levels of hue and saturation of blue and orange. I do dip a little bit into red for the hat on the bear, But for the most part, it's pretty much just blue and orange, and even the grass, I guess, gets a little bit green, but I try to make it a bluish green. And that's something I've been playing around with lately. I never learned too much color theory stuff. I've been trying to get into that more lately. But one of the basic things is just using complementary colors in a piece is really nice. And in this case, and complementary colors being two colors on opposite sides of the color wheel. So blue and orange, opposite sides of the color wheel, they work really well together. And I tried to make everything not too oversaturated in this. I wanted to make it not quite flat, but I just didn't want it to be super contrasty because it's kind of a relaxed piece. It's not some big, epic, bombastic fight scene. So I tried to keep it pretty mellow and have a bunch of different layers of shadows so that there was nothing too drastic or dramatic. And I'm pretty happy with how this all looks in the end. The hardest part of this is what I'm doing now, rendering the bear, just trying to get the fur right. It was surprisingly difficult because I did very simple line work on the bear and I tried to do all the detailing in the colors, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think that is something that I need to practice more, doing fur tones, but overall I think it's pretty cool. So let's take a final look at how this piece turned out. Alright. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out, and I think Cal's gonna really like it. I'll get it printed out and I'll make a community post of me giving it to him if he's cool with that. But besides that, that's all for today's episode of Popcross Studios. I hope some of this was helpful or at least entertaining, and let me know in the comments what you thought of the whole me being on camera during the time-lapse thing. Was it distracting or did you like it? If people like it, I'll use it more in the future, and if not, I won't. But anyway, besides that, everybody give Calvin a happy birthday in the comments and I'll make sure he sees it, and that's all for today. Thanks for watching Popcross Studios, home of the nerdiest art videos on YouTube, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.